Hello, how are you? Well, now we are dealing with lesson 4. And lesson 4 is about cooperation strategies. The agenda for this lesson is we will start with a definition and with an introduction about cooperation strategies. Then we are going to analyze the advantages and disadvantages of cooperation. Then we're going to explain in different successive videos the different kind of cooperation agreements. Finally, we're going to deal with the special issues of the management of cooperation agreements. But, well, try to imagine that you are exiting the faculty using the front door. Well, now I know that you are confined in your house, but maybe in the future when someone hears this and says, confined in my house, what's the meaning of this? Okay, well, let's imagine that you exit our faculty through the front door. When you cross the street, you cross Avenida de Daroca, and which restaurants are you going to see? Well, you will find the Cien Montaditos, you will also find a Burger King, a Domino's Pizza, okay? Well, the majority of them, if not all, they are franchises. Franchises are a way of cooperation agreement really useful in order to expand a business without using much money from the franchisor, okay? So we are going to study with this special kind of external development, which are cooperation agreements. And why should we dedicate a different lesson to cooperation agreements? Well, let me tell you. First of all, if we are dealing with external development, cooperation agreements are a kind of external development. So we need to study them. Also, they are an interesting solution to develop for many firms. As I told you, if you are not really long of money, okay, maybe some cooperation agreements can help you to get in touch with some partners that could have the money you need, okay? And also because cooperation agreements are growing in importance. As I told you about franchises, if you have a look at your street, maybe half of, it depends on the street obviously, okay, but an important percentage of the commerces you will find are franchises, okay? So we need to dedicate special attention to cooperation agreements. Esteban Fernandez Sanchez defined cooperation as an agreement between two or more independent firms that sharing or joining part of their resources and or their capabilities and not merging create a certain degree of interdependence in order to increase their competitive advantage. Well, let's divide this definition into parts. Let's break it into parts. Well, first of all, two or more firms. Two or more firms, there are going to be cooperation agreements of two firms. There are going to be cooperation agreements of more than two firms. Independent firms. What we mean by this is that a true cooperation agreement takes part between independent firms. If all the firms belong to the same business group and are obliged to cooperate, then they are not really cooperation. It's a policy of the group. Know what I mean? In order to be able to say that two firms, two companies are cooperating, they should be independent and they should have the possibility of not cooperating. If they cannot decide, then you cannot truly call it cooperation. Well, this company share resources, share normally the best thing that they can give to the cooperation agreement. For instance, when Starbucks came to Spain, it did it through a joint venture with Grupo Vips, in which Starbucks put the reputation of the company, the brand name. Starbucks was recognized about coffee and so on, all the knowledge about coffee. And Grupo Vips put their knowledge about the Spanish market, their experience in the Spanish market. Okay, so both firms put the best in the cooperation agreement. What else? Well, after the cooperation agreement, it's created a certain degree of interdependence. I mean that the firms involved in a cooperation agreement cannot do things isolatedly, or many things isolatedly. These firms lose part of their autonomy. Think about the Burger King, which is in front of the faculty, okay? Imagine that they wanted, the franchisee would want to sell pizzas. They couldn't because the franchise agreement doesn't allow them to sell whatever they want. They cannot even choose the prices of the products, okay? On the other hand, the boundaries of the firms get blurred. What I mean is that you cannot distinguish between the franchisee and the franchisor. You know you have entered Burger King. Some people don't even know there is a franchisee, okay? What else? They develop joint activities. The firms involved in a cooperation agreement get coordinated in order to develop one or many joint activities in order to achieve a common goal. Well, the common goal should be maximizing the value of shareholder funds in the long run. In order to do that, you want to get a competitive advantage. But in order to do that, there are going to be more specific goals. For instance, the companies that in Spain have created a consortium to build the high-velocity train in the Arab desert, okay, the goal of that consortium specific is to build that train. To build that train in order to what? In order to create value for the companies belonging to the consortium, okay? Well, I said creating some interdependence. Let me give you an example about this, okay? Have you ever taken a cooperated flight? If you have, probably you have booked a flight with, let us say, British Airways. But once you get into the plane, you see that the plane belongs to, let us say, LATAM Airlines. And maybe the crew belongs to Lufthansa, okay? So it's possible that the plane belongs to one company, the crew to another, and you book the flight with another. And if you look at the board, it's possible, it's more than possible, that there are 3 different codes for the same flight. Okay, so the flight is cooperated. You don't really know who you are flying with. Maybe you are flying with all of them. This is very typical of transoceanic flights in order to share the costs that the company must afford. Okay. Why do firms cooperate? Which are the main reasons for cooperation agreements? There are 3 main blocks of reasons to cooperate. Well, firms cooperate to reduce their costs. Which cost reductions can we find? Economies of scale derived from the size. If you cooperate, you're bigger. If you're bigger, then you reduce the cost because of that. Economies of scale. Economies of scope. If you cooperate, you share resources. If you share resources, you can reduce the cost. Experience effect. If you cooperate, you accumulate experience faster. If you accumulate experience faster, you increase experience effect. And there are some other opportunities of cost reduction. There's one specific one, which is the reduction of transaction costs. I am going to deal with in the next video. Pay attention to that. Okay? Then, in order to compete, this can be called strategic reasons, but reducing costs is also strategic. But in order to compete, firms through cooperation can get new resources and capabilities they need. The example I gave you, for instance, about Starbucks and Grupo Vips, this helps both companies to compete. In order to overcome entry barriers, to enter a new country, for instance, or to enter a new industry, okay? In order to increase the size of the company, so that the company becomes more competitive. In order to positively influence the configuration of the industry. It's possible that many companies of the same industry cooperate in order to, for instance, develop a technological standard. Android was a technological standard created by a cooperation between many different companies belonging to the telecommunications industry, led by Google, but many companies in fact participated in the development of Android in order to create a standard for an operating systems for mobile phones, specifically for smartphones. Okay? Or many directions of growth could be easier to be developed using these cooperation agreements. For instance, cooperation agreements can help you to do something similar to vertical integration, but avoiding vertical integration. Okay? You are not integrating, but you are creating a long-range cooperation agreement with your supplier. Finally, we find a third block of reasons. I like to call them, you know it, miscellanea reasons. Now you know how miscellanea is written, huh? Okay, miscellanea reasons. So, well, sometimes cooperation is a trend in an industry. I mean that many companies in the industry tend to cooperate. Do you remember what I told you about airlines? Well, I am going to get deeper into that. Also, some stakeholders of the company could be prone to cooperate because they like it, because of past good experiences and so on. Now I'm going to give you an example of each one of these three. To reduce the costs. Well, do you know purchasing groups? Purchasing groups sometimes are used by small supermarkets in order to cooperate with other small supermarkets to gain bargaining power in front of their suppliers, to buy all their supplies together. Okay? As a purchasing group puts together an important demand, then the price of the supplies can be reduced, can be competitive with big chains. On the other hand, maybe you are thinking, okay, this puts suppliers in a problem. But the thing is that isn't this strategy also available for suppliers? What do you think? And do you know any case? I do. Check your reminders or search for it. Okay? Then I said to compete, in order to compete. Well, do you know that in 2001, Nestlé and Coca-Cola created Beverage Partners Worldwide, which was a joint venture in order to develop an iced tea beverage, and well, it was the popular Nestea. Well, this partnership was broken in January of 2018. Okay, Nestea announced that they were ready to do it independently, so they broke it up. And Coca-Cola was granted a franchise agreement in order to elaborate and distribute this drink in some European countries. One of them was Spain. Finally, we have got the miscellanea reasons. The miscellanea reasons, sometimes cooperation, I said, is a trend in a given industry. In which industry cooperation is a trend? Well, in the airline industry. Have you, when you take a flight, do you remember this stuff when they say, okay, welcome to all our passengers belonging to One World Alliance or SkyTeam or whatever, okay? Well, these are cooperation agreements, these inter-organizational networks of different airlines in order to cooperate, in order to reduce the costs of operating flights, okay? Well, this is the end of point 1. Hope you understood it. And well, let's move to points 2. See you then.